Steelers Nation, let's dive straight into what went down at Soldier Field, because this matchup carried a weight that nobody in Pittsburgh could ignore. Walking into that stadium without Aaron Rodgers already set the tone for a challenging afternoon, and all eyes shifted instantly to Mason Rudolph as he stepped into the spotlight. It did not matter that the Steelers were slight underdogs or that the environment was hostile from the very first snap. What mattered was how this team would respond with their backup quarterback thrust into a pressure cooker situation against a Chicago squad ready to defend its home turf. And right from the start, Rudolph made it clear he wasn't interested in easing into the game or playing cautiously just because he was filling in. He wanted to swing big. His very first throw of the afternoon told the entire story. Instead of opting for something safe, something that would let him settle in, he unleashed a deep shot toward DK Metcalf, signaling that he was ready to attack early and force the Bears' defense to respect the Steelers vertically. But football has a funny way of turning bold decisions into unexpected chaos. Nahshon Wright climbed the ladder, twisted his body, and pulled in an interception that set the Chicago crowd on fire. It was the type of play that could rattle a quarterback right out of the gate, especially one stepping into a tough situation. Yet, listen to Rudolph afterward and you hear zero hesitation. He didn't blink. He didn't retreat into conservative mode. He doubled down on his decision as if nothing about that moment had shaken him at all, saying he would make that throw every single time because of the trust he has in Metcalf. And it makes sense. Metcalf arrived in Pittsburgh with massive expectations after the off-season trade that sent shockwaves through the league. He is not just another wide receiver. He is a physical force who regularly wins contested catches, someone you give chances to even when coverage is tight. Rudolph saw the pre-snap look, liked the matchup, and fired. The Bears' defender simply made the better play. Sometimes it really is that simple, even if the result ends up tilting momentum in a direction you do not want. What followed for Rudolph was a mixed afternoon of resilience and frustration. He completed well over 70% of his passes, spread the ball around, and even delivered a touchdown. But he also had to deal with a strip sack that left everyone shaking their heads. On that play, the timing looked promising until the defense peeled off at the last second, jumping the check-down option Rudolph was about to target. He had to reset his throwing motion, and in that split instant, the pocket collapsed on him. He explained after the game that he simply needed to secure the ball better, acknowledging the pressure, but also recognizing that turnovers like that have to be avoided if the offense wants to stay in rhythm. The offense as a whole never fully settled in. It felt like every time the Steelers found a spark, something pulled them backward, whether it was miscommunication, breakdowns in protection, or inconsistent drives that fizzled out just when they needed to extend the tempo. The Bears, on the other hand, tightened up as the game went on and managed to seize control late, eventually walking away with a narrow 3-point victory that stung even more because the Steelers entered halftime with a lead. Losing a road game is one thing. Losing after showing early composure is another. As if that wasn't enough, injuries began stacking up at the worst possible times. Joey Porter Jr., who had already left the game earlier with a leg issue before returning, eventually went down again, this time with a hip flexor that sidelined him for the rest of the afternoon. He still managed to record a few important tackles, and he even had a moment where he undercut a pass from Caleb Williams, only to lose the ball on the return before eventually falling back on top of it. The play was wiped out by a penalty anyway, but it summed up the afternoon perfectly. Flashes of brilliance overshadowed by costly complications. Then came Broderick Jones, who suffered a stinger late in the fourth quarter while blocking on the outside. You could see the frustration boiling in him as he slammed his helmet on the sideline, knowing this was the kind of game where every detail mattered and every absence was felt. Calvin Anderson stepped in, but by then the Bears had the momentum firmly on their side. Jones has been a warrior for this team ever since he was drafted, rarely missing any action, and transitioning back to left tackle this season only added to the pressure. His durability has been one of his hallmarks, which made seeing him sidelined even more troubling. And while the offense had its own roller coaster performance, the defense faced a completely different kind of struggle, one that has lingered far too long. Caleb Williams looked entirely too comfortable spreading the ball around, finding openings over the middle again and again, and the Steelers' defenders found themselves reacting rather than dictating the flow. Patrick Queen spoke in a way that felt raw, real, and revealing, pointing directly at schematic problems that left underneath defenders in impossible positions. When you have two players responsible for two separate routes toward the sticks, while another target streaks freely across the middle, no amount of effort or athleticism can compensate for being outnumbered by design. Queen's frustration was visible and, honestly, justified. Players can bail out a bad call with a great play once in a while, but they cannot consistently overcome system flaws that keep putting them behind the action. The defensive touchdown helped keep Pittsburgh afloat, but it was not enough to mask long-term issues that continue resurfacing each season. The coaching staff is expected to put players in positions to succeed, and too often this year, the opposite has happened. Queen made it clear that adjustments could have been made during the game, but they never came, and that lack of adaptation is becoming a storyline of its own. The result of all this is a Steelers team that suddenly finds itself sitting at 6 wins and 5 losses, slipping in the AFC North standings and losing ground at a point in the season when momentum should be building, not fading. The schedule ahead is unforgiving, and every weakness on either side of the ball becomes magnified when playoff positioning tightens. The Steelers have talent, they have leadership, and they have the grit to fight, but they cannot afford the kind of inconsistencies that define this matchup. Steelers Nation, picking up right where we left off, the conversation around this team has become louder, more emotional, and definitely more complicated after everything that unfolded in Chicago. And as we break down this next stretch of the story, it becomes clear that what happened on that field was not just about one loss. It was about exposure. Exposure of gaps, exposure of lingering issues, exposure of the identity crisis the Steelers keep trying to shake as the season pushes into its most defining phase. The pressure is mounting, and the team feels it. The coaches feel it, and the fan base absolutely feels it. Because once the dust settled after that narrow loss, the reality hit that this team is no longer sitting comfortably within the postseason picture. Falling to 6 wins and 5 losses may not sound catastrophic at first glance, but in a division as unforgiving as the AFC North, slipping even one step backward can feel like tumbling down a cliff. Every team in this division plays with a mentality that the margin for error is paper thin, that 1 or 2 bad weeks can completely rewrite the season. And Pittsburgh is now staring directly at that truth. But what makes this situation even more frustrating is how preventable some of these issues have been. Let's go back to the defense, because that side of the ball has been the backbone of this franchise for decades. The signature toughness, the unwavering discipline, the ability to create chaos. That is what Pittsburgh football is supposed to look like. But this season, especially in Week 12, the cracks became too wide to ignore. When Caleb Williams consistently found open receivers roaming the middle of the field, it wasn't because Steelers defenders suddenly forgot how to play. It wasn't because Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, or anyone else was suddenly outmatched physically. It was because they were being asked to hold down areas of the field that simply were not logistically possible to cover given the defensive calls. And Queen's comments reflected that frustration in a way that felt honest rather than accusatory. He was not blaming teammates. He was not pointing fingers. He was highlighting a systemic problem that has haunted the Steelers for years. When he described trying to defend 2 routes at once while also worrying about run support, you could hear the exhaustion in his tone. Being placed in conflicting responsibilities is a recipe for disaster, and week after week, these mismatches continue showing up on film. The image from that key play, 2 defenders locking onto routes at the sticks while another receiver glides across the middle untouched, is not an isolated moment. It is the same storyline played out in different games, with different opponents, but always with the same painful result. Adjustments are supposed to be the lifeline for any defense when things go off script. But according to Queen, those adjustments never came. As the Bears' offense rolled up the field, as Williams kept hitting those soft spots, as the Steelers' lead shrank and then disappeared, the scheme remained stubbornly unchanged. That is the kind of static decision-making that drains momentum, drains player confidence, and drains belief that the system is operating at its best. It becomes even harder to watch when you realize the defense still produced a defensive touchdown for the second straight week, proving that effort and playmaking ability are not the issue. The structure around those plays is what keeps cracking open at the worst possible moments. Meanwhile, the injuries piling up made everything even more volatile. Losing Joey Porter Jr. for the remainder of the game meant losing one of the few pieces capable of taking away a receiver in man coverage. He has battled multiple injuries this season already, and the timing could not have been worse. The hip flexor issue raises concerns because lower body injuries for defensive backs can become lingering problems if not handled carefully. And his earlier scare in the second quarter, followed by the fumble on the interception return that eventually didn't count, painted a portrait of a player trying to push through, but being pulled backward by his own body and the unfortunate bounces of the game. Then there is Broderick Jones, whose presence on the offensive line has been crucial ever since he moved back to left tackle. Seeing him sidelined late in the game, as the Steelers tried to rally, sparked instant worry. Offensive linemen often hide injuries since they live in trenches full of constant hits. But when a player like Jones shows visible frustration, you know the pain or the disruption was significant. The stinger he suffered may not be season-ending, but the Steelers cannot afford any more shakeups along the offensive front, with the remaining schedule being as grueling as it is. Every game ahead demands stability, and losing a key anchor is the last thing the unit needs right now. The offense, for its part, continues to fight through its own identity search. Mason Rudolph stepped in under overwhelming circumstances, and while he faced criticism for the turnovers, he also deserves credit for his poise and command during long stretches of the game. Completing more than 70% of his passes is not something to overlook, especially when he was being asked to push the ball in situations where the margin for error was microscopic. The connection with Metcalf is still developing, and while the early interception overshadowed what could have been a statement play, their chemistry will grow with time. That throw was a gamble, yes, but it was the kind of gamble quarterbacks take when they trust the talent they have around them. Even with all the adversity, the Steelers' offense had moments where it looked ready to seize control, but the lack of continuity kept breaking drives apart. Whether it was pressure off the edges, coverage that forced checkdowns, or misfires in timing, something always seemed to pull the offense just shy of reaching its rhythm. And when your defense is struggling to contain the opposing quarterback, every stalled drive becomes magnified. The complementary football the Steelers need has been inconsistent all year, and that showed vividly against Chicago. As the week moves forward, the biggest question surrounding the team is how they respond to this accumulation of setbacks. The slip in the AFC North standings adds urgency, but urgency alone does not fix systemic issues. This coaching staff has to address schematic weaknesses that opponents continue exploiting, especially in the middle of the field. They have to solidify protection and find ways to maximize Metcalf's impact. They have to evaluate Rudolph fairly, without the instinct to pin the entire loss on a couple of plays that individually do not define an entire performance. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Explosive whispers are shaking the NFL world tonight as the Pittsburgh Steelers reportedly make multiple moves that could upend their roster immediately. Sources close to the team hint at a flurry of activity that insiders are calling unprecedented in recent memory. While nothing is official yet, the buzz around Heinz Field is deafening, with fans and analysts alike speculating on the ramifications for the Steelers lineup. According to insiders, these moves are not minor tweaks. They could represent a fundamental shift in the team's rotation, potentially impacting starters and backups across the board. Speculation ranges from unexpected trades to surprise signings, with some suggesting that key positions could see a sudden change in hierarchy. The intensity of the chatter has even reached players in the locker room, with some veterans reportedly both intrigued and on edge as the team weighs its options. Social media has exploded with reactions as followers try to piece together fragments of information. Every hint, every cryptic post from team insiders, and every comment from analysts is being dissected in real time. Fans are theorizing about which players might be moved or promoted, with some suggesting that the changes could signal a new strategic direction for Pittsburgh, one that prioritizes depth, flexibility, and a shakeup in the rotation. The timing of these moves has only fueled the frenzy. Observers note that the Steelers have historically been cautious with major roster adjustments mid-season, making this sudden activity all the more sensational. Rumors have pointed toward a desire to address lingering weaknesses, surprise opponents, and potentially set the stage for a dramatic shift in team dynamics. While the exact details remain under wraps, one thing is certain. The Steelers' locker room could look very different in the coming days. Fans, analysts, and rival teams are all on high alert, waiting to see how Pittsburgh will finalize these moves. If these whispers hold any truth, the ripple effects could be felt across the league, as every team starts recalculating matchups against a Steelers squad that might be far more unpredictable than anyone anticipated. Stay tuned, because if this rumor is true, the Steelers may have just pulled off one of the most intriguing roster maneuvers in recent memory, enough to keep the entire NFL talking for weeks. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.